Hey explorers, Brian here. In our last lesson, we talked about the most famous Southern African country. And of course, that's South Africa. While it's grabbed the international headlines over the past century, let's get a glimpse of what the rest of Southern Africa has to offer. Does that get you pumped for our journey? In this lesson, our goals will be to describe the physical characteristics of Southern Africa, assess the pros and cons of relying economically on the mining of precious metals, and determine the relationship between high rates of agricultural employment and a lower rate of national production. Let's get to it! Southern Africa consists of Lesotho, Eswatini, Angola, Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Namibia, and Botswana. It's surrounded by the Indian Ocean to the east and the Atlantic Ocean to the west. The region is dominated by plateaus that descend into narrow mountains or flat plains by the coast. The Kalahari and Namib deserts cover nearly 400,000 square miles and meet up with South Africa's Great Escarpment. The Zambezi and Limpopo are the two dominant rivers of the region. On the border of Zimbabwe and Zambia, the Zambezi flows into majestic Victoria Falls, the largest waterfall in the world. The Great Rift Valley runs along the eastern side of the continent and through Malawi, a country sharing a name with a vast lake that occupies 1/3 of its land. The mostly arid and semi-arid climate is seasonal. For instance, Botswana's Okavango Delta is flooded during the summer months by heavy thunderstorms. The opposite extreme is also common. From 2018 through 2021, rains have been less than expected. This has resulted in dry ground unable to hold water and sustain crop growth. Southern Africa has been the home of some incredibly advanced and wealthy civilizations. The remains of one can be seen at Great Zimbabwe, a city that served as the center of a thriving trade network between the 10th to the 15th centuries CE. The Khoisan people have inhabited the region for thousands of years. As you previously learned, in around 1000 BCE, the Bantu peoples migrated, with some making it to southern Africa. Regional languages have typically descended from these two branches. Europeans entered southern Africa in the 15th century, seeing it as a literal gold mine, as the region is extremely rich in natural resources. Imperial governments were formed with whites in charge. In the 20th century, the nations gained independence and changed their colonial names to instead represent their African heritage. It wasn't easy, though. Whites dominated Zimbabwe's arable land and were forced out by citizens as the government looked aside. Angola and Mozambique, both former Portuguese colonies, experienced brutal wars for independence, followed by civil war. After independence, racial disharmony did exist, but there was a much smaller white population in these countries than in South Africa, making the grips of racially charged policies not quite as tight. Today, democratic rule is favored by the majority, but its execution is hit or miss. Namibia and Botswana are rated as free by Freedom House. They are considered some of Africa's most stable democracies. The lower-scoring nations are also the ones that experienced significant challenges while forging their independence. Likely not a coincidence. The diverse GDPs per capita in Southern Africa are another indication of the varying success levels of these countries. Botswana, one of the world's fastest-growing economies, and Namibia come in well above the sub-Saharan African average of $1,500. These economies are powered by the mining of diamonds, gold, silver, and other natural resources. Meanwhile, Angola, rich in oil, and Zimbabwe, rich in coal, are right around that average. Zambia is filled with copper, but it is susceptible to economic volatility dictated by the global copper market. The other nations fall well below the sub-Saharan average. What are the pros and cons of relying economically on natural resources such as precious metals? Please pause and take a minute to answer in your PDF. The largest source of employment in southern Africa is farming, as over 40% of the working population of 6 of these countries are employed in agriculture. As you likely gathered from the GDP data, the region suffers from high levels of poverty. In 5 countries, over half the population lives on under $2 a day. The highest levels of poverty occur in countries with the highest rate of agricultural workers. Why do you think the highest rates of poverty occur in countries that primarily rely on agricultural employment? Hint, it has to do with self-sufficiency. Please pause while you respond in your PDF. The population of these countries is growing, and growing. Currently, Angola has about 35 million people. In 40 years, that number is on pace to nearly triple to 95 million, just one of many sub-Saharan nations experiencing a population explosion. Religious belief has been influenced by colonialism, as at least 60% of each nation is Christian. There is, however, a sizable Muslim population in both Malawi and Mozambique. Each nation has life expectancies below the world average of about 72 years, with Lesotho coming in at just 55 years. Sadly, this can be attributed in part to a high infant mortality rate, malnutrition, and poor health care. Most traditions revolve around family and village rather than the broader community, so cultural practices can vary from village to village. Music and dance are woven deeply into the fabric of Africa. In southern Africa, Khoisan music, featuring a rhythmic playing of the flute and guitar, has gotten people on the dance floor for decades. And there are few places on Earth that are richer in natural beauty. 40% of landlocked Botswana is dedicated to national parks and reserves. This scene is fairly common in southern Africa. If you want to experience a real-life safari, this is the place for you. And if you're a thrill seeker, check out the Devil's Pool at Victoria Falls. Here, you can jump in a pool of still water literally at the edge, 350 feet above the bottom of the falls. So, let's answer our last question of the video. What place or cultural practice in southern Africa would you most like to experience in person? Maybe the music, dancing, the scenic beauty. You can also use examples from our South Africa lesson, such as the beaches. Take a minute to record your answer in your PDF. Welp, we didn't go over the falls, so let's quit while we're ahead. That's a wrap. This area has endured some difficulties over the past century, but the beauty and resilience of the land and the people are undeniable. For our next lesson, grab a flotation device because we're headed to the island nations of southern Africa. Until then, keep exploring.
Hey, hey.